Hello, everybody. Welcome to another film flashback. It's Matthew as usual. We're here with Nick as usual, and today we are joined by good buddy Robert. This episode that you're going to get today is just slightly different because this is what happens when you let me choose the movie. We decided that we would flash back to a horror comedy movie from 1985. This is House. So this movie, the reason I picked this one, guys, is first of all, I love the horror comedy genre, but it's also because when I was young, I was in my grandmother's house, and I found a small collection of like 4 or 5 comic books that were from probably the 80s or the 70s, maybe a little mix of, so imagine an old Spider-Man, this or that, the yellow pages, probably belonged to one of my uncles, and one of them was House, in a comic book horror form. So as you can imagine, the art in it was just beautiful. And at that time I was too small. My mom wouldn't let me watch scary movies. So I took them home because nobody wanted them. And I'm sitting in my bedroom looking at these awesome images of these like skeletons and these weird flashbacks and things like that. And then, eventually came around to check out the movie, expecting it to be super creepy and scary, and then I'm like, oh, it's funny. They're kidding around. And so this is 1985, and so I know that we're going to get into a lot of what we talk about on Film Flashback. We talk about the way that you did and sort of had to do effects before, say, this would be right at the end of where you were forced to never use a computer versus the way that you've done effects the last 30 plus years. And so that's why I picked this movie, because I was like, I knew that for sure Nick and whoever we got to guest today was not going to have seen this before.
No. So you're wrong about that. I'm going to. Oh, yeah. All right. So let me start off. I'm going to start off with something about this movie, House. The movie poster / VHS box. It's a great poster, right? It's a hand ringing a doorbell, and it's great. It draws you in.
Disembodied skeleton hand. Yeah.
The thing about it, it's that part is never in the movie, and so I have seen this multiple times, and it's not because I'm like, oh right, that. It's because I remember, and I even worked at a Blockbuster, and I remember watching this, going like, as a kid, you would go through the horror movie section at the rental place and be like, oh, you know what? Have we seen this? Like, no, I don't think so, because you're looking at the hand. If you see Jason on a box or Freddy, you're like, yes, I have seen that movie. When you see this hand, you're like, well, that looks scary, but I don't think I've seen it. And then you see it, you're like, oh, right. Yeah, no, I saw this. So I probably read it multiple times having already seen it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, I hadn't seen this before, and that was quite an eye-opener, is what I'll say. So wait, are you saying that they meant to make it a comedy? Or?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, dude, it's a totally silly movie, and I think part of what, gives it away is right at the very beginning, it's just, like, full... I mean, not the very beginning, the first scene is not what you'd call hilarious, finding an old lady hanging from a noose.
No, that's what it is.
But then it cuts to him doing, our main character, who is Roger Cobb, played by William Catt. You see him doing a book signing. He's playing a writer, and the people in line there, the whole thing is constant jokes where the woman's asking, oh, how's your wife? And he's like, oh, we're divorced. And she just doesn't listen to him and starts barreling forward. Same actress who plays Frau Farbissina in the Austin Powers.
Oh, fun fact.
That woman. I was like, I know her. And so, I mean, the movie's goofy, but it's supposed to be goofy. And so it's attempting to do a couple of things at the same time. It's trying to be funny. But there's a handful of things that happen sort of thematically and like that where you go, that's heavy and that's really intense, not to mention the scares themselves. And so it's like, I can't decide if the movie's confusing or confused or if it's just kind of a little ambitious. We're going to try to make you laugh one moment and I don't know what, care the next, be scared the next.
I'll give them credit for making a movie. That's what I'm saying. I don't think they got any of it right. That's just the bottom line. Yeah. I mean, did you ever laugh at any of the funny moments, or did you ever?
I laughed at George Wendt as the neighbor, like pretty much every time he was on. I just thought the timing there was good, and the editing for him was good. George Wendt. I
laughed at the size of the news that lady was going to try to hang herself with. I don't think you could hang the mayor of Munchkinville from that news, man. It's like a shoestring. I was trying to, which is a hard thing to watch for, but it's a very hard genre to do, which is horror comedy or anything where you're going through, even if it's a drama that's got comedy, it's like, all right, if a funny scene is too close to something that's supposed to be kind of scary, it doesn't work. The editing is so important in these, if you're going for like a kind of a drama, but Guardians of the Galaxy, right? You have these very emotional scenes, then a comedic scene, and then like, something intense. It's like the way and that might be a terrible example, but name whatever movie you want. If they have all the different elements, they've got to be edited in such a way where they've got to be spaced out enough and then close together where the jokes land, because bang, bang, after a horror moment, you open the closet and a raccoon actually does jump out or something like that. The timing of it. And this kind of, I don't feel like it was cut how you would cut a horror comedy today.
No.
Yeah, I think one of the things that surprises me the most is that this movie, it says it's rated R. And I'm like, why? Like, I know that the sequel is PG-13, and this one was supposedly rated R, and I was assuming it was PG-13 because there's no actual blood and nobody curses.
Right.
You don't see anybody naked, and so I don't even know how on earth this gets a restricted. And the PG-13 rating existed by this point. It was a couple of years old. It was, you could have been. And it felt like they were going for that, because this movie reminds me of like what I would call a PG version of Evil Dead 2, where they're trying to be over the top with the gags and with the jokes and the strange way they present them. But Evil Dead 2 has a couple other things going for it that this movie absolutely does not, where it's like it's really contained and you've got the blood and the gore and the excitement. Well, of course, and obviously the character of Ash.
There were multiple, and I had to look this up because I was really started to dive into like, okay, when did horror comedy start? And like, when did that actually become a thing? And my first thought was, I had two, one was Poltergeist and one was Evil Dead 2. So Poltergeist actually came out before this, which is not a horror comedy.
Poltergeist is a comedy?
I don't think it's a horror comedy, but it's not a horror movie. It's not a comedy, but it's got elements of both those things. Evil Dead 2 definitely comedy. And so I think Evil Dead 2, so Evil Dead 1 came out prior to this movie, right?
Or right about maybe the same year.
It could have been around the same time. But so there were scenes in this movie where I'm going like, is he gonna like put that shotgun on his hand? Like I feel like things I wanted this character to do, they did in Evil Dead 2 later on, where it's like, it would have been cooler than him, doing this other thing. And so it's again, and that came out I think a couple years after this did, but just trying to compare it to other movies at the time that were coming out that were horror comedy.
Yeah. Also would call that, I mean, that's really a lot of, that's in the writing too, because I mean, Evil Dead is like, that's a perfect example of horror and comedy together, whereas this is just like, I laughed at the parts that I wasn't supposed to laugh at, I'm pretty sure. They
kind of, I think there is in the script they get a little bit, they bit off a little bit too much, because when you have a simplified setting such as Evil Dead 2 has, where it's just like a limited number of characters in a far off place in the woods, then you don't have to bother trying to write in what would happen if there were other people around, because there are no other people around. So we don't even get into, in that movie, you don't even really get into too much, like, nobody cares who Ash's neighbor is. Right. Because it's not a part of the story. Right. But when you make the haunted house in the middle of a suburban neighborhood, then that's very ambitious, because now you got to address all the fact that there's other people around. So you have this character of the neighbor, which, like I said,
horrible mom too.
and you've got more than one neighbor, and then you have to bring her in, and then you've got the cops do get called at some point, and you've got to have all this extra stuff going on, all this extra explanation, and so the movie ends up having to rush through that to hurry up and get to whatever the good stuff is, and get it over by 90 minutes. So it's almost like they should have saved themselves some trouble by taking it out of suburbia, but the point was, I guess, I don't know why they did it. Maybe because it was fun to have it set in the middle of.
It got comedic relief, I guess. I don't know. Yeah. I thought it was interesting too. One of the main plot points in this was the ghosts come at midnight, right? But like one of the reasons the horror didn't work, like there's not really any jump scares. It was so bright in the house, like nothing happened in the dark at all. You know, so at any point, I'm like, what is it, noon? You know, like I have no idea. Right. And they go like, who's scared of a ghost when the lights are on? You know,
shadows. Not a lot of shadows. Yeah.
Yeah.
Plus, he was the aggressor. I mean, think about that fish that came alive on the wall. It wasn't doing anything to him. It was just like, I'm stuck on the fucking wall, man. Help me out. He's just like, kill it, die.
Sure, I'm sure that a lot of the people who are potentially listening don't haven't seen the movie for reference. So we should just like explain the scene we're talking about when we talk about it. So like the basic plot of the story is you have this writer, as I mentioned before. He ends up it's told in flashbacks what's really happening, which ends up being kind of confusing because there's no signal when exactly you're going into a flashback or a dream, which is also in this movie, or in a sort of fever dream vision, which is also in this movie all over the place. But the actual timeline of the plot is that he was living with his beautiful wife and their young son, and they were living in the field with his aunt. The son disappears. It appears that he's drowning, but when he dives, the man dives into the pool to save him. He's not there, so the son disappears, and clearly that traumatic event led to getting divorced, leaving the house, and eventually the aunt, who's an older woman, she hangs herself, and he inherits the house, but instead of selling it, he moves in by himself, and he starts to confront these like ghosts and demons. And so there's so many fun sort of, you can imagine the writer's room, people sitting around, well, how would the ghosts manifest themselves? And one of the things is what Robert was just talking about, where they've got this giant marlin, is it, or is it a sailfish? I forget, one of the two.
It's a sailfish.
That's on the wall, having been like a trophy, and eventually it comes to life and starts flapping around. However, it is attached to the wall and poses no threat.
Oh.
I thought it was going to start singing like Frank Sinatra.
The bass, like, you know. Hello,
By the way, I do also have to point out for the audience that all this exposition and plot that Matt Clay just explained, Robert and I had no idea what was going on.
No idea.
No idea. I thought I was lost, and Robert was on a different planet. We had no idea. I thought for a minute we had all started the movie at the same time, and I thought I might have been watching a different movie.
Yeah, like, I had no idea what was going on. It was just like, wait, what? How did that happen to his son? And why did there's a car that sped off when the son was disappearing? I'm like, what's the point of that? It's just.
It allows, yeah. I mean, so the car speeding off allows for the plausibility that the kid didn't drown but was taken or something, and so like, because the kid ends up disappearing in the pool, makes no sense. Yeah, so this is definitely one of the things that because I obviously like the movie. One of the things that I like about it is that it's a show me movie. They don't do a lot of tell me. They just kind of like present the information. And so I could totally understand why it can be confusing, because when you do a movie that way, you could easily lose an audience member, even like an audience member who's paying attention and is used to watching movies. You have to be able to try to lead them along and follow what you're saying as a filmmaker. And I would say this movie does not achieve perfection in that route, because it is totally easy to get lost and go, wait a minute, are they back together again? Oh, no, this is a flashback for when they were together before. Yeah.
And they look exactly the same.
Yeah.
No haircut changes or anything. And, there's not I will say, because there are many things it does good. Like, I enjoyed rewatching this, and I think for what it is, it's a fun movie. I guess you could look at it like there's a lot of symbolism for him going back to the house and being a Vietnam vet and having some mental health issues around Vietnam, which is a little bit lost on our generation, but at the time, very prominent. And so the guy's literally dealing with demons, physically and psychologically when he goes back to this house. So, I mean, that was cool. And you eventually kind of figure it out. I guess if you want to, like, it's one of those things, I don't think you're watching it going like, oh, this guy's fighting his inner and outer demons. But it kind of is. And afterwards you could look at it like that. But I think I like that there was no real, I'm thinking of like, Poltergeist or something like, oh, well, it turns out, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, no, we just we jump in this haunted house. The lady, we know it's weird and we just kind of accept it. And you're talking about reading that comic book that you found. One of the things I noticed, I thought was pretty cool. So I dug the monsters in the movie. I thought the
last
terrible,
guy especially.
Yeah, the Big Ben, that guy looked badass. He looked like the dude from Scrooged a little bit.
Yeah.
But I liked how different each. It doesn't look. If you went to that world where all those things are from, every single demon would look different. I feel like, and I feel like a lot of times they look the same. You're mass producing things. There's a scene where he's in the bathroom because he gets a lead based on a painting that his son might have gone. Stay with me here. He gets a lead from a painting that his son might have gone through the bathroom mirror. And when he goes in there, there's like 6 different hands that grab him, and each one, it looks like We Are the World of hands. It's like every hand's a different color and a different size.
Oh, that's true. I don't think
there's a green one and a purple one.
Like a squid got him or something too. It's like,
and some kind of tentacle.
Like tentacle.
Yeah. It definitely. It felt like. You know how sometimes this movie I think falls into the category of sometimes you're watching a movie and you're like. I feel like the writer's room, they had a lot of fun and they were throwing up ideas on the board, and eventually they got enough ideas where they were like, that's enough material for a movie. And people are like, but we're going to need to like tie it together and have it make sense. And they were like, well, secondary concern.
And again, as an actor, it would have been really fun to do. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
You get to swim all the time and you're like fighting these fake creatures. That's pretty cool.
So there's a tentacle, right? Cool. What's the tentacle attached to?
Yeah.
Man,
we don't know.
You're talking about the writer's room. One of the writers on this was Fred Decker. And so they got the idea for this based on a Twilight film, either movie or episode, or Twilight Zone movie or TV show. And they were kicking around the ideas with their buddies. You know who Fred Decker's like good friend is? Shane Black. And so I don't know if you remember a little movie called The Monster Squad, which we did for film Flashback a few years ago. Fred Decker co-wrote Monster Squad with Shane Black.
Of course. That's where I know that from. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, you kind of see it. It's like you like horror as a genre, but I was telling these guys before, I was like, yeah, we're gonna watch this movie. It's horror, but it's not like horrifying. You're not gonna be losing any sleep after watching Alice.
You're not gonna need your Looney Tunes, Nick.
I usually like to tee up some old classic Looney Tunes before I go to bed after a good horror movie, but not necessary tonight. I'll free up the DVR space.
Not really scary.
Yeah.
You could
Ozark it is.
Yeah.
Probably a brave kid this movie, and it wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah.
But I think it has to do with the lighting. Again, like nothing's that scary during the day.
But also what you said about the Vietnam thing, actually, that makes it more interesting if that's what they were going for.
And I don't know if there's not a lot you can find about this movie that I've been able to scour in the past 2 or 3 hours on the internet.
Cut for us, yeah.
Yeah, there's not a lot out there, but I mean that's got to be part of it, right? I mean, when you look at it afterwards and you think about it, like the guy, it's probably something that was spoken about in the writer's room, and it just didn't quite come across as much in the film. I mean, you could see it; it's there, but
so I want to ask, like, because you were talking about. Maybe this is a movie about a guy dealing with inner demons and outer demons, like manifestations almost. And like you could see that he's doing both. Thematically, the movie is like very adult and kind of dark thematically. So that if I explained it to you, I go, so it's a horror comedy. The opening scene is an old woman hangs herself, and you're like, huh? Okay. And it's like, so our main character, get this, he's got PTSD. And they're like, oh, it's hilarious. Oh, he's divorced because, well, he thought his kid was drowning in the pool. And he dove in and couldn't save him. So they got divorced over it. And it's like, wait a minute, where's the comedy part? Where's the funny part? Later on, you find out that one of the things he's horrified about is when he was in Vietnam. And we're going to show this. Him in Vietnam, and his best buddy in Vietnam gets shot. And as he's laying dying in the jungle, begging for him to end it all and put him out of his misery. But you see, he can't bring himself to do it. And so he leaves him there for the enemy to drag off and torture while he screams, "I'm going to get you for this."
Yeah, oh, that's right. I did laugh at that point.
Sounds like a
hoot. Was that supposed to be a laugh? That had to be a laughable thing. Because I was laughing my ass off at that point.
Like, thematically, this movie is fucked up, right? But it's mostly, like you said, brightly lit. You've got, like, goofy monsters, and you've got, this whole long in the middle where it's like, it's this silly comedy where a possessed demon hand is on the back of a child that doesn't there. And he has to chase the kid around because he's trying to hide that this kid is being attacked by a demon hand from his hot mom.
Okay, can we talk about that whole scene? I got to bring this up, and because again, I enjoyed this movie, but that makes absolutely no sense. That scene. You get this girl who he just met that was swimming in his pool, his neighbor, and then she drops her kid off.
Your aunt killed herself, and so I decided I'd keep swimming here.
Forgot about the giant body bag he had with the shovel, and she's like, "Oh, no big deal."
She goes out back because he's killed a demon, which apparently is corporeal enough for him to have a body to bury, and he's trying to bury it, but he has it like wrapped up in plastic. And he finds the super hot neighbor randomly swimming in his pool. And she justifies it going, "Oh, I used to swim here, before your aunt. Your aunt who hung herself recently. Oh, so I figured I'd keep swimming here. Not a problem, right?" And I'm like, man, beautiful people just do whatever they want, knowing that anybody's just going to go, "Yeah, sure, whatever." And so he's trying, and the hand is like somewhat still alive, and it starts reaching. There's this whole long, drawn-out gag it goes on for minutes of like the hand trying to grab the neighbor without the neighbor realizing it, and him trying to hide the hand.
I was like, another part Evil Dead 2 when you think about it. Like,
I was like, why hide the hand? Whack it with a shovel, point, and show the neighbor, and go, "Look, my house is possessed by ghosts. Now you're not a crazy person because you've got an ally."
Right.
No, like, why hide it? What are you doing? I'm burying a demon. I don't believe. Fucking look. Just lift it up and show her. What are you?
Was that again? Was it another, metaphor for him burying a demon?
Maybe.
Ex-wife, maybe he wasn't over it, and now he's getting asked about her.
I'd like to think that they went into this depth, but I think it's more along the lines of like,
"Hey,
man, this would be pretty cool. Let's do this."
I feel like I was watching the sort of like index cards on the corkboard.
Yeah.
Like, ooh, what if we had a scene where he's talking to the hot neighbor, but he's trying to hide this body?
Hilarity ensues. We'll figure it out on set.
You should hide the body if it's like a human body, because then she's going to call the cops. But it's a demon.
And like a giant demon, too. It's like a freaking elephant demon. It's huge.
It's a big demon.
So anyway, she doesn't get wise to it, and the scene where we were referencing before, she shows up later and reveals in a super. This is why it's a comedy. It starts at her face, and she's like, "You ready to play?" And it like tilts down slowly across her body, intercut with his reaction to then reveal a child, which is always a funny thing in a movie where you're like, okay, as soon as he opened the door, he would have seen that kid. It wouldn't. He doesn't have to wait for the camera to tilt down to like. But anyway, she pushes on him. She says this guy that she met for 30 seconds one day. She gives him her kid because she's got this undescribed date. And then he like starts to protest, but it's like she can't hear her because in comedies can't hear him because in comedies you can't hear people talk. And he ends up trying to having to babysit the kid. But before that, there's this long drawn out hand sequence. What the heck? It goes on and on for minutes.
He chases a child into a bathroom, and then he's like, he comes out, she sees them. It's like, oh, he had to go to the bathroom. Who lets a grown man take your child into the bathroom? That's just
not in 2020. Mother. Yeah,
he's a horrible mother.
And then he gives him a bath later.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's a little weird.
Yeah,
that scene. I don't know. I guess though in the 80s, you trusted your neighbors a little bit more. I guess there's more of that, like, oh yeah, go trick or treating, no problem. Just come back when it's dark or whatever. Like, I don't think you really get that as much anymore.
Now, if you were doctoring the script, okay, so you two know all about writing just a script. Imagine you had somebody come up with an idea. They go, what if the neighbor's got a son that's right about the age of his missing son, that's blonde just like his missing son is, and then now he has to take care of that boy, and like, what are the possibilities in terms of storytelling and character building that could happen when he has to take care of a boy that is the same sort of age and potential would remind him of his own missing son. Except they don't exploit it enough because they do these two long sequences, one with the hand and one with the demons who almost get away kidnapping him. And then the woman shows back up after her unexplained reason for being away, and he gives the kid back, and she just leaves. And those characters never show up again.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that was like just a total distraction from the through line of the story. It had nothing to do with the plot of the movie at all.
And the kid was really calm when these demons were trying to yank him up the chimney. He's just like, yeah, cool. It's all right.
Good actor. But he was legit frightened at a couple of other points. You could see this poor kid. When that kid is calling for mommy, he is not calling for the actress.
Not at all.
And we got it.
Is actually scared.
Child labor laws did not exist then, I take it.
Well, that's why you don't, even if you thought in your script, I'll write in a kid who's like 4. You don't ever cast a kid who's actually 4.
No.
Well, there's a famous saying, picture it's Steven Spielberg with Drew Barrymore when they're doing E.T. And there's a scene, what's her name in E.T.? The character, and Drew Barrymore plays a little sister in E.T. And there's a scene where she's just bawling, crying, and there's another scene where she has to get scared, and then she started crying. And so it's a scene with him after the take, like consoling her. He's like, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." He knew he was going to do it the whole time to get the shot he wanted, and he did it. And then she cried, but you gotta do what it takes. Welcome to Hollywood, kid.
Yeah.
Welcome to Hollywood, kid.
It was actually twins, by the way. So there were labor laws, because clearly they did full days, but they were just twins.
Wait, Drew had a twin?
No, for this one. The kid that played Jimmy. Yeah. Kids.
Maybe the crying one is one of the twins, and the nonchalant Jimmy is the other twin, and you just got like 2 different personalities.
Are you sure that's not Trevor? Because he was a little different in the other scene. No, he looks the same.
There's so many aspects of the way that they try to tell the story that reveal it's a comedy, because they tell it like a British farce where it's a lot of like somebody trying to hide something and jumping in front of somebody else in front of a door, like no, don't go in there. There's a perfectly good reason not to go in there. Just this over the top kind of. He's always trying to hide the ball. I don't know why. I don't know why you should feel guilty about there being demons in your house, that you have to hide it. It's like if they're so obvious and visible.
If you're going by Nick's standard, then it's these Vietnam guys who didn't want to show their demons and they need to hide them. So this could be like a really, really deep movie if they did it the way that Nick suggested they did it.
And so if we flash forward a little bit to the very end of the movie, which is a failure, it kind of not stick the landing. They imply that that's what they were doing. Like he gives this sort of like stock. He literally says, "I'm not afraid of you anymore," and that gives him like magical powers to defeat the demons.
Right.
And it's like, that would have worked, but you would have had to set it up before that the demon's power was feeding off of his guilt and his fear, which they didn't successfully do. So it seems like I'm leaning towards Nick, where that's kind of the idea.
But the whole thing does not explain, like, you can't hurt me anymore. He takes a live grenade, shoves it up them. They run away, and then the neighbor and his ex-wife come out and see the house on fire. So it's like, clearly that demon could have hurt him.
Yeah,
legitimately.
It definitely wasn't all in his head, but I think it would have been a worse ending if at the end it was all in his head.
Oh, well.
You know what I mean? That would have been like, it was just a dream. Like that's the worst ending you could ever have.
I've been
Yeah. I do think so. The ending is very unsatisfying. The very end is very unsatisfying. But I do think the third act was pretty cool because Act 2 we get basically fun and games. Like we're a bunch of scenes that don't make sense that are just like goofy. They're kind of going a little bit deeper into the world. But the third act, like that's when it starts to get a little creepier. It starts to get a little cooler. Things start to make sense. You know, a little more sense. And I did like the third act.
What happens? What Nick's talking about is like the guy. So it's well set up that his aunt was a painter and she painted all these creepy paintings, but it also you figure out as over the course of the story clearly these paintings are her trying to express what she's really seeing.
I had no idea that his aunt was a painter of creepy paintings.
I didn't either until someone said it.
There's like 5 guys. Next time the movie.
Next time, send me the book, and I won't read that either.
Yeah.
They mention it like 3 times that she's a painter. He goes, "My aunt painted that," and
probably get a beer.
I didn't get it.
He's got this. So the one painting that they were looking at, it's got the clock in it. It's got the door. It's got a rope in it, and it's all creepy. But there's like a rag hanging over the corner, and sort of launching us into the third act is he pulls the rag off the painting, revealing what was underneath it before, and it was the bathroom mirror, and it's got his son in it like he's in a cage screaming, and so that's what lets him know that's how maybe I can find my son through the bathroom mirror. And he smashes the mirror, and that's the tentacles we talked about earlier, and he goes into what looks like the sunken place from Get Out.
Yeah.
Where he just dives in and it's this black void. But he has to fight these random monsters, which again look awesome. They're just these awesome puppets. I love when the big bat-winged skeleton creature takes his shotgun, does like an awesome Clint Eastwood.
Awesome move, yeah.
It was like, hey, why not? He's a demon. There are no rules. You can make a demon savvy with a double-barrel shotgun if you want.
Well, we have these in hell, actually, the same model.
Dude finds himself. He is now in. This has happened earlier in the movie too. He's now in his own flashback. So they established his Vietnam flashbacks, but now his flashback, he's really in it, and that's where he finds his son in a bamboo cage inside his Vietnam flashback, and he begins to be chased around and haunted by the dead demon of his war buddy that he left behind. It didn't have the guts to mercy kill.
Whoa!
Big Ben.
But what if it's saying that his time in Vietnam is when he lost his connection to his son?
Just certainly wouldn't have existed. Yeah. It is definitely, it's the wrestling with demons thing. There were a lot of ideas. It just feels like they went and made the movie when they probably could have used another 6 more weeks of toying with the script to like tighten some of this stuff up. But the last, 20 minutes or whatever it is of him with Big Ben, his war buddy, and that guy in that fantastic suit.
Awesome suit. If there was more of that type with Big Ben, I think it would have been a lot better movie.
There should be a spinoff just with the Big Ben character.
Yeah.
Like who's he go after next? I know that grenade didn't really kill him.
No. I mean, he fell off of a cliff onto a rock, and he survived that.
He had his arm taken off, and he stuck it back on, and it worked again.
He's fine.
I'm dead.
That grenade's nothing to compare to what the Vietnamese army did to him.
That's right. They tortured him for weeks. So, they probably cut his dick off. So
sounds worse.
Yeah.
Sounds worse than the grenade.
I think he can survive anything.
That guy's played by Richard Mole, who I remember first from Night Court.
Oh.
big night court guy back in the day.
Wow.
I was just a kid, and I had parents and older siblings, and occasionally there'd be TV shows on there. Whatever. He's like the bailiff, I think, in Night Court. But he also was.
Shit, he is. Wow.
Also, Batman the animated series. He's Two-Face.
Really? Wow.
Two-Face.
That man had a good career. I'm proud of him. I'm happy for him.
Big, tall dude, legitimately scary for a few moments toward the end of this movie when he's just creeping around that house because he's just too tall. And because it's not a puppet and it's not stop motion, it's creepier than the other stuff because, you know, the thing that comes out of the closet that looks like it's from the movie The Thing, it still moves like a puppet, and you have to like fast cut because otherwise you'll see like the wires and stuff. But this is a man in a suit, so he can throw furniture out of the way and open doors, stalk down a hallway, and it's like it's very naturalistic movement because it's just a dude in a suit.
Here's another along same area. Do you know who the stunt coordinator was for this movie?
Hit me.
Kane Hodder.
No!
I remember Kane Hodder played Jason Voorhees. And
Whoa!
then he's played a ton of different monsters and stuff.
It's like 4 installments, like 6, 7, 8, 9. Like Jason.
I quit
X.
counting. It's a lot.
Yeah.
it's a
Is
lot.
he still Jason, or is there a new Jason?
No,
I don't think he's it anymore.
Okay.
He's
I'd say.
long career. If you don't know Kane Hodder and you like horror, you're an idiot. Everyone who likes horror knows who Kane is. You
He's a pretty big name in horror, for sure.
I didn't realize it until you said
horror guy, Robert.
Oh, I love horror. No, I love horror. Yeah.
So, like, when your go-to, do you have like on your short list of, let's say somebody was, I want to get more into it. What are the movies they have to see?
I think A Quiet Place. I don't know if I'd consider that a horror. No, that's a horror. Fuck that. That's a horror.
Yeah,
sure. And a lot scarier than this is.
A Quiet Place is terrifying because you're in the theater and someone chews popcorn. You're like, shut the fuck up. You know, you're gonna die. You're gonna die, and that is terrifying.
And there's no fat on that script.
No.
Everything that happens has to happen, and it helps tell the story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is different. It's going for a different thing. This movie comes out in like February of '86. It's made in like '85, somewhere around there. And it's like they were clearly trying something. It felt like an experiment. But what we were talking about when we decided to talk about this one is that this reminds us all of video rental stores.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
You know, and yes, every good movie was in the rental store, but you would sometimes you went to the rental house, you went to the Blockbuster, you went to the Hollywood Video, you went to your local joint with a movie in mind, and sometimes you didn't. And when me and my buddies would watch horror movies by going to the Blockbuster or the Hollywood Video, I'd just go to the horror section and just pick out by the cover. Like, cover.
Yes.
So we watched movies that we would never have chosen, like Basket Case and
Ghoulies.
And I've seen Ghoulies. Have you seen Ghoulies 2? Have you seen
Ghoulies Go to College? Yeah.
Is that a real thing? Ghoulies go to college? Oh,
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so House is one of those, you were talking about the cover. It's a great cover because what they would do is they would hire these people. This is for younger viewers. They would hire people like brilliant painters, and they would make these incredible posters.
Oh,
And it's so funny because as a boy, when I wasn't allowed to see those movies, the posters made me think that the movie's visuals were going to be off the chart scary. And then you finally see the movie, you're like, that poster is scarier than the movie.
Yeah. I don't want to rehash like what I'd already mentioned, like literally to start this episode, but it's the type of, the poster is so good that you could watch this movie on the Sci-Fi Channel or whatever came on back in the day, and then go to the store and be like, oh, this looks cool. I don't think I've seen this, and rent the same exact movie you just watched without even realizing it.
That was the best part about Blockbuster One now, because you'd go to the store and it would be like Tom Hanks with his box of chocolates and Forrest Gump. That was literally what it was like back then. You're like,
yeah,
this looks cool, and then you try, you're like, oh, well, this is shit.
Then he eats those chocolates.
That's chocolate.
So I worked at a Blockbuster for I think 2 years in college, and you know, as you're stocking things, you're looking constantly at movie boxes and different posters and stuff. And I got to the point where I would hate. So this is like 2002 through 2004, maybe 2005. So we obviously had the classic section, that we had new stuff coming out, and I was so bothered. I hated the covers, and if you look at some of the movie covers, especially for comedies, they try to tell you the entire movie on the box, and it looks ridiculous. Like, it's clearly not a scene from the movie, but it's like they're terrible. It makes me not want to watch any of the movies. Like, I would
often not read the description on the back.
Yeah.
I don't know about you guys, but to me it was like a trailer. You know how trailers will give too much away? Like before I saw trailers on YouTube all the time, before YouTube was a thing, I would go to the video store and I would like read the first couple sentences and then I would like stop reading because I knew that the back was going to ask a question as if you didn't know the answer, but it was when the answer was always yes. And you're like, and maybe a few other guests show up, and it goes, no, I don't need that coy. Like, you wouldn't say that if the answer wasn't, of course, other guests show up. You know, You wouldn't say that, and maybe some other things happen, and then nothing did. So I just, so we would rent a movie, and they would show the cover to, like, my buddy. How about this?
A great cover is one behind you. Jaws, I mean, that cover is perfect. That just says everything. You're like, holy shit, this is going to be cool. Just because
if you never heard of Jaws, I would show you that, and you'd go, yeah, I'll watch that.
But that's a good example of, like, showing you what the movie is without giving too much. It's not trying to tell you the whole movie in one picture. Right? That's what I don't like. Like, you can't tell a whole movie, or they would just make paintings that were really good that would tell you 2-hour dramas.
Well, if they were trying to do it, it would be Jaws ripping someone in half. Then it would be like, okay, you just destroyed the movie.
Just think about it. The main character of Jaws isn't on this poster. The main character in House isn't on the poster for House. You know?
Badass.
Yeah.
But they just, posters mattered because you'd go to the movies and that's how you decide what movie you were going to watch next, is whatever you saw the poster for at the movie theater or at the Blockbuster. And we just do things differently now.
And I don't remember, I mean, a lot of these, you wouldn't see, like, there weren't commercials. Like, for a movie like this, I doubt there were many, if any, commercials. And it was probably, honestly, too scary for even Blockbuster to have much up about it. But it was, you're going to rent something scary. Maybe you're having, like, sleepover or something, so you're going to rent something scary. And then it's either you base it off the box or word of mouth. Like, think of how big word of mouth was when you're renting a movie. Oh, did you guys hear about Ghoulies or Critters? I heard, Tom Stevenson rented it the other night at his parents' house and whatever, stepdad's house. It's like word of mouth was our internet.
That the case? Like, Robert, I remember people. I was talking to somebody about the Blair Witch Project recently, which is 1989, and people were trying to talk about, like, well, I don't know if that was really all that influential. And I was like, when it happened, the marketing, the word of mouth marketing was, this is the scariest movie you'll ever see, and you won't be able to sleep. You won't be able to go home. If you have to drive through the woods to get home, you're not going to make it if you've seen Blair Witch. Like, do you remember that's how it was, word of mouth stuff.
Paranormal Activity, same thing. It's just like all completely word of mouth. People are like, this is the scariest thing I've ever seen. I can't sleep. And then it's just, everyone's like, okay, I got to watch it too. And then, bam, they got a huge career out of it.
You would see a movie with less, like, you had less to go on before you saw a movie. You had a poster like this, a movie like House, you wouldn't ask a lot of questions. Somebody says, you should see it, and then you would just go see it.
Yeah. Now it's like, hey, let's go see this. Cool. Let me just pull up a trailer real quick.
I'm just gonna Google it and see, and there'll be 37 reviews. Somebody who wrote a review before they even saw it.
A 6-minute trailer.
But also, there's so many more movies right now, so it's just like it's impossible to watch them all. So you have to say no. So I understand that at the same time.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, there is a lot more options, and not to mention what we could watch at home.
Yeah,
no, that's a totally good point. Because I was talking about the Blockbuster earlier. It was like, well, look, do you want to rent House or do you want to rent Orca?
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
and we're like, I guess the one with the skeleton head.
If you go in on Friday night, you ain't going back Saturday. Like, that's gonna last you until Sunday or whenever they're due.
Whereas now, like, how many horror movies they have on Netflix right now? It's unreal. It's completely unreal.
Yeah, and most of them are probably garbage, but
Just get a couple bucks, get a Shudder subscription. You could see everything, you know, as ever made.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's Shudder, you said?
Oh, yeah. I'm not doing a commercial for Shudder, but check it out. It's basically Netflix horror.
Oh.
Hey, no free ads.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm in on that one.
If they want to pay me, they're welcome. Yeah. Well, listen, like I chose this movie because I was like, we've done a bunch of movies that are kind of 80s, which is great, and that it's kind of fun and funny, and sort of we've gone from genre to genre, but it's been a minute since we tried something that was horror, and I was like, you know what, I think that this one will spark some conversation, and this has been great. I really love having you, Robert, to talk about. We're sort of like reminiscing a little bit, but I think the movie shouldn't be R, and if you had no idea that it was trying to be silly, and I told you, here's a horror movie, you saw that poster, and it was rated R, I can understand why somebody would be disappointed.
Well, I'm not saying I'm disappointed. I'm saying it wasn't a good movie, but at the same time, I also had fun, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Makes sense, of course.
Yeah, I was like, this is terrible in so many ways, but I'm also like, I was entertained.
We're big fans of categorizing, like compartmentalizing, like, hey, is this going to win an Academy Award? No. Did I enjoy it? Yes.
Yeah.
So that's why we don't like rate. Anytime we watch them, we don't really like have a rating. It's like, yeah, this was fun, you know, or like sometimes they suck. But
House 2 is even sillier.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Hey, real quick, I got one more fun fact for you guys. This came out in Hong Kong. Do you know the title, the release name of this movie in Hong Kong?
It was Demon on the Inside.
Any guesses?
I got no idea.
Robert's actually not too far off. The title was Don't Go Into the Haunted House After Midnight.
How was I close? I wasn't close at all.
You had a couple of words in there.
It's dead on. You might as well make it just the script.
Exactly. I know. But maybe they thought the box wasn't descriptive enough. They're like, we really need to tell them what's going on here.
The tagline is, well, let's see. There was this war in Vietnam. Let's talk about colonialism for a second.
The marquee guy's like, oh, jeez.
Like, oh, that's too much. Damn it.
Oh, Gil really needs a new gig.
Well, this is a blast. Thanks again, Robert, for hanging out. Thanks, Nick.
Robert.
You guys said you could check out this podcast is available in the morning after we record them. So in this case, it'll be available on Friday morning on the 8th. And you can check out, obviously, if you're watching this, you will be able to see it on YouTube. Search for Handlebar TV and podcast. We're available Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio. And we have some more great stuff coming up. We'll probably go a little bit less obscure. I'm not going to choose the movies all the time. And then we'll have a lot of fun. We're doing these pretty regularly, so check in probably on Tuesday, and we're going to have another episode. But in the meantime, thanks again for joining us, and we will catch you next time on Film Flashback.
See you later.